Manchester United are the champions of Europe again.
Hello and welcome back to the One United podcast. I'm joined as ever by Henry. Well, Henners for today. Henry, how you doing?
Yeah, not bad. You?
Yeah, not bad at all. Not bad. And I'm also joined by the other Henry. Yet again, it's brilliant to have you on again, mate. How you doing?
I'm all good, thank you, mate. How's yourself after last night?
We won. What you can't really say much more than that, can you? I think we'll leave it at that. Just very bored, but we're through. No complaints there. So you brought me nicely onto our first topic of conversation. We won't talk too much into the game. Obviously, it was a bit of a bore draw, not really much to go off. We'll talk more about certain players and how they performed. So I think we'll start on a positive note. Goal scorer, 7th goal this season, Scott McTominay. Henners, I'll come to you first. How good is he become this season?
Yeah, he's an important player now. He's finally showing what we wanted to see. Box to box is his best position. It's not sitting and holding. We discussed this. Me and Henry discussed this before we came on air, and it's so frustrating to see when he sits back and holds because it's just not his position. He needs to be box to box if he's going to play. He needs someone like Fred alongside him who can maybe sit and hold and break up the play, and then arriving late that's where he plays best. So. And hopefully, if we can see it, surely Solskjaer can see it now. And he's starting to kind of unleash him a little bit over the last kind of couple of months. So obviously we saw in the Leeds game yesterday, there's been other games which he's been allowed to kind of roam forward. So, yeah, it's important that he does that and doesn't keep sitting back because it can become an asset, especially with Pogba's injury. We need someone to be able to do that now. And not just sit and hold. So hopefully he can be that guy. I'm still not going to say he's on the level of Paul Pogba because he's not. He's not got the passing ability and the know-how to kind of hold people off and stuff. He's not quite on that level yet. But again, he's learning from one of the best in the world. So hopefully he can push on and keep doing what he's doing.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Henry, I'll come to you. What sort of impact? What did you make of the impact he made off the bench and just his all-round performance yesterday?
No, it was obviously really good. And when you come off the bench and score the winner, there's not many sort of negative things you can say about a player, especially a midfield player. I think he's really starting. A word that was used to describe him yesterday, I've seen a couple of times, was midfield general, which I think sort of captured it pretty well. He's obviously got the physical stature in sort of middle of the park, which is always a good attribute and something we've sort of seen over the years with many sort of United midfielders. People, always mention Brian Robson and players like that sort of back along. Not comparing McTominay directly to Brian Robson, obviously hasn't built up that pedigree just yet, but he did magnificently. His all-round play, I think, this season has massively improved. He's always a pretty decent ball winner, could always pick a decent pass, but he's got a lot better going forward. Driving with the ball, technically, I think he's constantly improving his finishing technique. I think is magnificent. One of the best. I don't want to say one of the best finishers at the club, perhaps a bit of an exaggeration, but his technique is very nice from the sort of top of the box. And he's shown that consistently this season, and long may it continue because Scott McTominay, whether or not people like him or not, I think the facts are that he's a very, very good player to have in a squad.
Yeah, well, I'll shift it back to you then, Hannahs. He obviously came through the ranks as a defensive midfielder in big quotation marks, but where do you see his best role at the club now that we've really seen him get a sustained number of games?
Well, if I'm not mistaken, I believe he was a striker in the youth rank before he had that massive growth spurt. So, it's not as though this is a strange position that he doesn't know how to finish or he hasn't been practicing it for, the early parts of his career. He's been doing that for 5 or 6 years where he was, the talisman up top that'd score the goals for the youth teams. So, he's kind of used to finishing. We're acting like he's some sort of he's like Fred. He's not. This guy grew up. He was born to finish shots. That's why he was up top at the start. So, and they just saw a better position where he could be a bit stronger in midfield, and he's come good. So the box-to-box role is where he's best.
Mm.
You know, none of this nonsense where he just sits back, because it absolutely does my head in when we just sit back with Fred and McTominay in midfield. We have no out ball then, and we have no progressive passing, and it just seems to be a bit like it's almost like hitting hope at times when we're up against the bigger sides. You know, it's moments. It's not progressive, and we're not building on something. So box to box, just keep playing him there, and he's he's doing all right.
Yeah, fair enough. I'll second that. Now, Henry, we spoke a little bit yesterday about where Donny fits into this team and stuff like that. But given where United want to be, and assuming that Pogba leaves, where do you see McTominay fitting into this team next year? Because he's not a Pogba replacement, is he? And he's not good enough to be that defensive midfielder on his own, sort of thing. So do you think he will have a first team spot next year if United carry on improving the way they are?
I don't know. I think that's always a tough question. I think it always varies season to season when you talk about sort of coming up, who's going to start. There's been points where people would say Fred's, got to be nailed on in the starting 11. And there's been times where people would say Pogba shouldn't be in starting 11. And then people would say, Pogba should be is our key player. It does change. Recency bias is a big thing. And people talk a lot about, who should play where week in, week out. With Pogba out now, it'll be interesting to see, how McTominay has continued to be sort of utilised. But I don't know, really. I think McTominay is a squad player. There's no saying he couldn't develop beyond that. I mean, we've seen, in specific performances, I think he's been, a lot better than a squad player could put. I mean, the Leeds performance was that of a top player. It's not a squad player performance that. But there's always been players at United over the years who have played a squad role and sort of popped up in games. I mean, Ji-sung Park, I think, is a great example of a player that was utilised as a sort of system squad player and could sort of play anywhere. Obviously, McTominay hasn't got that versatility, but I think he could be utilised in a similar way. But we'll have to just see. I think it's nice to have the option rather than sort of discussing, who's going to play where. See how he develops, because I think, if he continues to sort of develop at the rate he is, he's going to sort of be pushing that starting 11 very, very sort of hard. And with the Pogba departure, etc., we'll have to see. With regards to Van der Beek, I don't know if you'll sort of come on to him a bit more in a minute, but I don't think he's a 10 at all, personally, at least not a 10 for Manchester United. Maybe at Ajax, he's played that role a lot and it sort of suited their style with the 1-2 touch sort of stuff. But I think now we've sort of, I was saying this to Henry as well before we came on air, now we've had Fernandes, I think we want a 10 who's going to do a lot more with the ball than Donny does. And I think he's a bit scared, and Henry used the word, I think, which was good, conservative, to try anything silly, which I want to see a bit more of it. I say silly, just try a bit more, be a bit more ambitious. But I'd say Van der Beek's probably more of an 8, probably, to be honest. But we've got lots of midfield options. It's good to have. We'll have to see what Ollie starts to do with Van der Beek and McTominay going forward.
Yeah, you've brought me nicely onto that then. So I was planning on coming to Van der Beek next. I'll come to you first, Henners. I'll say my piece on him, and then I'll open the floor to you. I think, I sort of agree with Henry in the sense that he's not a 10, but he's also coming from one culture of football to a completely different one, isn't he? The Ajax way of football, that patient build-up, that ball retention, and creating chances because of the system, and how they're sort of safe in that way, aren't they? And you can see that with his play. He's very good at retaining the ball and keeping it. He doesn't give it away very much, but he's not very adventurous in his, real killer ball instinct type of thing. So I think, I don't know, unless it can be taught into him. I think he will need an adaptation period, and I think that's what he's getting this year. But Henners, what do you think?
He can't play a 10. He needs to be an 8. He needs to. I know people have been giving him a bit of stick because of poor performances and maybe feeling like he's not in the right area and not in the right mindset, maybe even as well. But he needs to be playing as an 8. And my reason why is because we are terrible at retaining the ball. We are absolutely awful at retaining the ball. We're fine when we're going quickly on the counter-attack, and we're fine hitting teams hard on the break, and that's absolutely fine. You can be a great team at doing that. Liverpool are great at both. That's what and City as well. They're great at both. But they both have midfield players that can retain the ball. They both have Gundogan. They've got Thiago. Wijnaldum's not a particularly cutthroat player. He's more ball retention, making sure you're busy and and keeping things flowing and stuff like that. So I think he has to play next to a good quality CDM. And then, we need to learn to retain the ball, because you can't win titles by being a moments team. It doesn't happen. So this idea that we were going to win the title this year was just utter nonsense, because when we can't retain the ball, if you can't retain the ball as a side, I know Leicester did it 4 years ago. That was a bit of an anomaly, but they were still okay at ball retention. They still had Drinkwater and Kante in there. I think people forget that they were counter-attacking, but they could retain the ball. They could keep it. We can't. We just can't keep the ball. So he needs to be as an 8, and that's where he'll play best, because Ajax played progressive football. It was always possession. It was always working teams around. And he was fine as a 10 there, but we don't play the same football. And if we do, he's going to have to play a bit deeper. And I think that once you get him there, he finds the better passes. He's a better passer than Fred. He's a better passer than McTominay. So he needs to be playing as that in that 8 role, and that will give us a chance to actually keep the ball rather than just gifting it away or going on the counter attack.
Yeah, fair enough. Now, Henry, it's clear. I don't know whether it's just a bedding issue or whether it's a style of play issue or what, but do you think we need to make changes to accommodate Van der Beek? And, how do you think we get the best out of him?
I wouldn't say we need to make changes to accommodate for him. To be honest, I think we've largely had a very, very good season. I don't think there's a need to sort of rehaul, or actually there's not much of a need to tweak much in that side. To be honest, I think there are obviously problems. We're far from a perfect side. There's some personnel problems here or there that could still be solved with transfers. Obviously the partner to Harry Maguire, something that's constantly talked about. Harry Maguire himself is constantly something that's talked about. Both those centre-back spots are, I don't want to say up for grabs, but some people would think that, they should both be replaced, and, the right winger, etc. There's all those problems. But, aside from sort of big glaring issues, this is a good United side. And it's always good to have depth. I don't know why everyone's sort of panicking. Money's not massively relevant, but I think, it's worth mentioning. Donny van der Beek was signed for, I think, around £30 million. He's not a £100 million player. He's now riding the bench, and he's not. I don't want to say he's not. He's a fantastic player. I don't want to say he's not good enough to build a team around. But we've got Bruno Fernandes at this club now, who's done magnificent things, and you've got Paul Pogba there as well, and we've got something that's working. And there's massively creative players in that side, and I think for now Van der Beek's just got to do what he's doing basically. Well, he's got to do more, but I think he's got to play the role that he's playing now rather. In that he's going to have to just be a squad player. I think that's the way it is. We always spoke when we signed him, talking about how he's going to fit in, and I think there was in the end a bit of realization he is going to have to be a squad player. You can't play Bruno, Pogba, and Van der Beek as a sort of 3 midfield, or Bruno at 10 and them 2 as a pivot. It would never work for cover. So I think Van der Beek, there's got to be an acceptance now from United fans that for now he's a squad player. Could he go on and be more than that? Of course he could, but he's got to definitely grab the opportunities when he gets them a bit more than he has.
Yeah, definitely. Now, just to round up the Van der Beek talk, I'll leave the floor open to whoever wants to answer, but do you think this was poor recruitment by Van der Beek? Because he's obviously a very good player, but he doesn't fit the system we try and what's the word? Adapt. There we go. Well, we try and take on. And do you think it feels like a signing that was made because there was pressure to make signings, if that makes sense?
Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I think that he was. People keep saying the signing was a panic buy, or maybe one. He probably is one for the future. The problem we have is we didn't have a good enough centre back partnership to be able to trust 2 more attacking players in midfield. So put it to you this way. City have got Stones, Diaz, and Laporte. Okay, so you can rotate between the 3. 2 of them, Stones and Diaz, have been fantastic this year, so credit to them. Then you can play, I know they played Zinchenko, or you can play Cancelo left back and Walker right back, or rotate however you want. But they can trust one in midfield. They play Rodri and then they play Gundogan and De Bruyne usually, right? Or, if maybe Foden or someone like that. And then for the bigger games, they might even play 2 holding. So they can rotate in those positions. I think we've got the right idea, but we've gone for the wrong signing first. We needed a centre-half first. That's a priority this summer. I don't want to see. However much it would be fantastic to have Ramos in the team, he for me would be a replacement for Maguire, not for Lindelof. You can't have two slow centre halves there. City have got Diaz and Stones. Diaz is a little bit quicker, but Stones is, again, good on the ball, both good on the ball, and they both kind of suit each other. So I think you've got to buy. I heard Varane's up for sale. He's quicker than Maguire. He's a trophy winner. He's good on the ball. You need to buy players that fit a new system if you want to win titles. And the system's got to be more attacking. So you can play Van der Beek and Bruno in the same team. You can. You've just got to be able to trust your centre-halves to be able to defend. And at the moment, do I trust Lindelof and Maguire? Absolutely not. In any game, I don't. There's a mistake in there. There's always a mistake in there. But maybe Maguire and a better centre-half? Yes, I trust those two. And we've got good fullbacks now. Wan-Bissaka's great defensively, so that's fine. And then you can play one holding midfielder, a good holding midfielder. I know I've criticised Rodri, but he's a very, very good player and he's coming clutch for City this year. He's been fantastic this year. You need to play one holding player and two in front. And then you can start to look at maybe a side that can challenge up the top, because Liverpool and City can keep the ball. we can't. I've mentioned it before and I'll mention it again. We can't keep possession. But if you're going to do that and have two more attacking players, and Donny, who's been okay at breaking up the play before, at Ajax, then I think it's a win-win. We just need a centre-half and things will start to come into play and come into fruition for United in that midfield.
Yeah, fair enough. One thing I'll say about the Varane signing, it looks very good on paper, but do you not think he is prone to a mistake on the bigger stages? We saw that in the Champions League last year against City. Now, in my opinion, that's one of the main things that Maguire gets bashed for. So, if you want to improve on Maguire, do you think there's better options out there that are sort of less liable to a mistake? Not
for the price the Glazers want.
No.
There's no way they're going to spend 90 million on a centre half. Not going to happen. They're not. I've said it before. This wish list that we've got this summer, though, is Sancho, Grealish, a CDM, and a centre half. Forget it. It's not going to happen. You've got to pick and choose your battles and who you want to sign. Varane, I believe, has got a year left after this on his contract. So Real Madrid will need to sell. They need to sell at the moment. They're struggling for cash. They need to sell players to bring players in. They all want to get rid of him for the right price. And 35, 40 million, yeah, exactly. He will win your points and he'll lose your points. Are we forgetting that Van Dijk, before he got injured, literally gifted Leeds a goal at Anfield? He's prone to mistakes as well. So is every centre half. Maguire pisses me off because he tried to nutmeg someone in his own half yesterday. That's just, don't do it. But Varane will win you more points than he'll lose you throughout the season. He's a trophy winner as well, and he's good on the ball. He's gone through a blip because the nicest way to put it, the Real Madrid side they've got at the moment is absolutely shit. It's awful for a Real Madrid side. They're struggling to beat mid-table sides. Look at it, see it as it is, and see value for money. He's probably going to be the best value for money we're going to get this summer. We won't get him from Meccano. I've seen stuff yesterday and today. I didn't think we'd get him anyway. He's not. He is maybe the style, but won't pay the money for him, and we're competing with Bayern, so that's not going to happen. Go for him. Best value for money, and he's got a mistake, but he's also a very, very, very good player and a very talented player. So I think you can't look past him and spend 70, 80 million on a centre-half that's unrealistic.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, just moving on to see us out for the game, I'll come to you first, Henry. What should our aspirations be for the FA Cup this year, now that we're not really in a title race anymore? Whether we were in the first place or not is sort of past the point. But do you think we now really need to focus on the FA Cup and really go all out to win it?
I think we should go all out to win it anyway. To be honest, I think it doesn't really matter. I think we've got a decent size squad. I know we've spoken a bit about perhaps a lack of quality in rotation. I think we saw that last night in the fact that it wasn't a great performance, but we have still got a big squad of players, and we should be aiming to be competitive in as many competitions as possible. And I think that sort of goes without saying, really. To be honest, aspirations got to be to win it. I think, we've come, close. Obviously, semi-final last year. We've been in semi-finals, all sorts of competitions in the past couple of years. Got to take that next step now. I think everyone would agree with that. That's something that's sort of a glaring problem with this squad at the minute that hasn't been proven wrong, is the sort of mentality of going on and getting closer to these trophies, getting to the final, winning finals. So I think that's always got to be the goal. With regards to just aspirations in general, I always said, bridging the gap to Liverpool and City this season was always the goal for me. I didn't think it was, before the season started, I never would have expected to be in this position that we are now. And I just said, as long as we can bridge that, the points gap's too big. We just need to bridge that next season and get a trophy as well, which I think is a big thing. And those things are still intact. I think, we should have bridged the gap. Unless a massive meltdown, we should have bridged the gap from last season to Liverpool and City. May even finish above one of them. I don't want to say both of them, so I think that's perhaps unrealistic, but we could finish above one of them. But yeah, we'll have to see. And then with regards to trophies, I think context's important. We can all, and I sort of tweeted this earlier, I think we can all sort of sit there and say that, we should be winning a trophy. That should be our goal. But you've got to keep context relevant. It depends who we draw and the sort of the overall context of those games. If we were to lose them, when you're looking at Solskjaer's overall position, say we got drawn against City or I don't know who else in the Europa League. I'm not sure who's even in the Europa League, but say a top side and we get knocked out in an unfair way and we played really well, then I don't think that's fair to hold that against Donny. I think context is so important. And although results on the face of it are so key, the be all and end all of sport in general, I think context is important. So yeah, I'm looking, for a trophy. The FA Cup's obviously the best chance of that now for us. But I think context is important when we're going to look back and sort of judge the season.
Yeah, fair enough. Henry, do you want to sort of build on anything Henry said? And then after that, who would be sort of your ideal quarterfinal opponent?
I think we do need to win the trophy this year. And I've said it before, we got knocked out in the semi-finals of the Carabao Cup, and that was... People massively understated that the importance of that game for not for us fans, for the team. That game was important, and we didn't turn up. So, trophies are important. Europa, not really. To be honest, when we got knocked out of Champions League, I know we'll all want to win the games and stuff, and that's fine. But give the youngsters a bit of a chance in the Europa. You're going to be travelling loads. You're going to be playing Thursday, which is the most inconvenient day of the week to play because you've usually got a game on Sunday after that, which is, no recovery time. Give the youngsters a chance. If they get knocked out, they get knocked out. But the FA Cup is, for me, more important because it's, it's in your home country, so you're able to have less stress with travelling and stuff like that. So I think that's more important than trying to go for Europa League. In terms of opponents, I mean, you take any the kind of the worst side in the competition. I don't want to. We'll get Chelsea. It will happen. It will be Chelsea or City. We always get some bullshit draw, in the latter stages of cups. So, again, it will be one of the top sides. You can just predict it happening. So, but again, you've got to beat who's in front of you. And if you can't beat teams like Chelsea and City, it's simple as that. You won't win the competition. So, yeah, I mean, it's important to win a trophy, but Europa League, just forget that. Forget it. Don't even bother putting Fernandes. Don't even put him in the squad for the Europa League. Genuinely, just Premier League and FA Cup is a priority, not the Europa League. It's not important.
Yeah, fair enough. Probably agree with you there. Well, we'll move away from the FA Cup and we'll move away from Old Trafford for our next and final talking point. Obviously, it'd be bizarre not to talk about Liverpool in the current climate because, things were going bad for them. But since we last spoke about them, things have gone, I imagine, worse than people could ever picture, really. They've gone from 4 years at home not losing a game to losing 3 on the bounce at Anfield. Injuries are still mounting up. And it's just a bizarre season all around. So, Henry, I'll come to you first. The obvious answers of Van Dijk and the injuries are there, but is there something else that's sort of more deep-rooted in Liverpool that's going wrong this season?
I don't know. It's a really tough question. there's obviously something going wrong. I think, the Van Dijk injury specifically, I did think it would have a big impact. It's probably had even bigger impact than I thought it was going to have. When you lose a centre back with that much quality, obviously it's going to affect you. But I think, Van Dijk in the overall sort of context of that Liverpool team is only sort of comparable to Ramos at Real Madrid, I think, with a centre back I can probably think of. In that, if he gets injured, the whole team will suffer because of that. He's a stalwart in that defence, and obviously it's been a big problem for them losing him, and obviously they've had other problems around that as well. I think every player has been injured at one point other than Gini Wijnaldum. But obviously big injuries across the park. But I think Van Dijk obviously is the biggest one. If there's a deeper sort of rooted problem, I don't really know, to be honest. Obviously sad news that obviously Klopp's mother's sort of passed away, which is obviously extremely sad. Sort of news today. Don't know if that sort of affected him as well. It might be a bit lazy to make a comparison like that and perhaps suggest, but obviously things like that do affect you. And you can see with his sort of reaction, he's not in the best of place at the minute, the way he's sort of been responding to journalists, etc. But I don't know. To be honest, is the answer to your question. I think Pep City had a big blip, the past couple sort of season or so, and they've sorted themselves out massively now. Whether that's the same with Klopp, I don't know. We'll have to see with Liverpool going forward, but they've also still got loads of quality there. There's just a bit of a downward spiral in terms of mentality. I think probably the big thing, especially with that Van Dijk injury. But I'd expect them to sort themselves out. But we'll have to see what happens the coming weeks.
Yeah, fair enough. I'll come to you then, Henners. Obviously, it can't be understated how much of an impact that Van Dijk injury will have. You look at City last season without Laporte for a lot of the season, they didn't do well at all. A key centre back getting injured will derail your season in a way, but it's the manner of the way that they're playing at the minute. Do you not agree? To be completely outclassed by Manchester City at home, to be beaten by Brighton, who maybe on paper, given the balance of chances, were the better team at Anfield as well, and then being beaten by Burnley, who have struggled all season. Do you think, the results are one thing, but the manner of the way that Liverpool are playing is something that is worrying to their fans?
Yeah. Firstly, for reference, I wasn't laughing at the Klopp thing. John just commented Virgil van Dijk, and I kind of started chuckling a little bit because, that's been the reaction from Liverpool fans anyway. So, in regards to their form at the moment, I think I read today. I don't know whether there's any truth in this, but Klopp's mother didn't die today. It was like a couple of weeks ago or something.
January, I think. 19th of January, something like that. 19th
or something, or whatever. So I guess that will have an impact on him, and it's never easy losing someone like that, especially for him in a pressure situation. We've seen him moan for the last couple of weeks, and now I can completely understand why. It's usually this stuff comes out a lot quicker than it has, but fair play to them for keeping it under wraps because, he's got to have time to grieve. So, in regards to them playing at the moment, even before this whole thing, there was something that wasn't quite right, and I said it last year. I never said they'd flop this year, but when you've got a centre half, it's the perfect storm. I'll put it that way or the worst case scenario for Liverpool fans. You haven't got your centre half. You've got little players here and there getting injured. Jota's injured, so you can't really rotate your front three because, with all due respect, Origi's awful. So you can't really rotate your front three then. But there's something that's different that I've noticed, and that is they're trying the same thing as they've been trying for the last 2 or 3 years with the fullbacks against lower sides. So Brighton, the reason, and I know they won 1-0, but let's not forget that they actually outclassed Liverpool at times in that game. I think it was almost the same amount of attempts on goal at Anfield.
Brighton had more.
There you go then. They were crossing the ball into 3 big centre halves aimlessly. Usually they get exactly that. You need rotation options anyway, but usually you get they get the bounce of the ball, or they get players making better runs, or whatever it is. But those three centre-halves were phenomenal in that game, and they were absolutely fantastic at what they did in terms of clearing the ball. There didn't seem to be as much threat from Liverpool. I didn't during the game. I wasn't going, these guys are going to score 2, because it didn't look like it was going to happen. They were off. The fullbacks' crossing's been poorer this year. They're being shut down now when teams play 5. Burnley were a perfect example as well of, they played the game to perfection. If they can't score against us, and with our defence and leaky, midfield and defence and the keeper making mistakes and whatever, if they can't score against us, they're in trouble. So, there's something that's not right. And it's not just the centre-halves. I know the Liverpool fans will blame the centre-halves. They'll blame no fans in the ground. But that's the same for everyone else. Personally, I completely forgot that everyone else didn't have fans in the ground. I thought it was just Anfield that didn't have fans. In fact, if I'm correct in saying, 3-4 weeks ago, they had fans in the ground. United didn't. We didn't have fans in the ground. We weren't allowed. So, there's all kinds of stuff's happened with that team. Yes, they've had injuries, but a good side gets injuries. They usually come through it if they're a top side. Liverpool without Van Dijk, City they're missing their best creative player. They're missing their best creative player, and they've just scored 4 at Anfield. I know 2 of them were gifts, but they probably would have scored more anyway. So, again, it is the perfect storm, but at the same time, they're just not on it. The fullbacks are just not doing what they were doing last year, and they started to tail off towards the end of last year. I don't know whether you guys noticed. They had a run towards the end of the last season where they looked a bit sleepy. It was like, we've got the league now. Champions that win a title, the best champions, the champions that react, win a title and then they go for another one. They go again. The attitude has been way off from those Liverpool players this year. They don't look like they want to go for another one. It's like, we've got one, we're happy with that. That's not the mentality of the United sides they're being compared to. So, I know there's no fans singing "You'll Never Walk Alone." It's a very emotional time for them. Maybe they should get the coaching staff to sing it, and the players will play a little bit better. But regardless, the best champions win 2 titles in a row, and they were being compared to our '99 treble-winning side last year. And I said at the time, that's an absolute embarrassment. That's offensive to our treble-winning side, because we played that last game without Keane and Scholes, the Champions League final, without Keane and Scholes, 2 of our best players in that season. So, it's the comparisons are ridiculous, and they've just fallen off, and they've shown they're not the best of champions, because it's not the performances, it's the attitude as well. They're not running, they're walking. Against City, some of their players were walking up front. I'm thinking, how are we going to compare this side to being one of the greatest when they're walking on the pitch? Again, is what it is.
Fair enough. Well, sort of moving into our last point, then I'll come to you, Henry. Do you think a bit of the blame lies on Klopp, because he made a big deal about bringing centre backs in January? He got a few players in, obviously Kabak and Ben Davis he got in, and still neither of them featured against City. They obviously they're stuck with the Henderson and Fabinho centre backs, which is obviously going to cost them going forward because they're integral parts of their midfield. So, do you think that this is slightly to do with Klopp in the fact that he keeps selecting teams that clearly hinder the way they like to play?
I don't know. A lot of people did point towards that, and there's definitely a point to be had there. I think the big thing about playing Henderson at centre back isn't the fact that he's playing centre back; it's the fact that he's not playing in midfield. I think that's the main sort of thing with that, is that he, we can all talk about Henderson, and there's some silly comparisons made. I don't think he's as good a player as Paul Pogba, for example. Comparison that's always made, but Henderson's a really good footballer, and again, like I mentioned with Van Dijk, is a stalwart when he plays in midfield. Doesn't quite have that impact at centre back, I don't think, or at least we haven't sort of seen that. Not as good a sort of leader in that sense. And obviously, he's a competent centre back, but he's not Virgil van Dijk. To be frank, he has been decent there. To be fair, there's an argument to be had whether or not who's the better centre back out of him or Joe Gomez. To be honest, out of him and Henderson, but there you go. I think Gomez is a bit overrated personally, but yeah, I can see why Klopp hasn't picked Kabak, especially against City or Ben Davies. Imagine throwing a player, Kabak's been, I don't want to say terrible form. I don't watch Bundesliga, but Schalke have conceded a lot of goals last season, or this season rather. I think they're bottom of the league, aren't they? Ben Davies has come from the Championship. Either of those players being thrown in the game against City, I think would have been silly. They get hung out to dry if they make a mistake. We've seen that with players. They can get jumped on very quickly in games like that. So I think he was right not to start them in that game. Actually, obviously they lost the game heavily, and it was an embarrassing result. But I can see why he made that decision. I think it's a tough one. I think it is very hard for Liverpool. I think the only solution to it is to just get better centre backs depth. I'm not even sure they've done that really with Kabak and Ben Davies. I don't know if that's good enough depth. If one is for a title winning side, obviously that they have previously very recently won the title, so perhaps a bit unfair to say that. But yeah, we'll have to see what happens. I think it's tough for Klopp. I really do.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree. It's weird, isn't it? Because there's a lot of big games for Liverpool, so it's going to be. There's a lot of big games coming up that's going to be difficult to bed them in. Obviously, they've got the derby coming up, and then Champions League returns, and it's not going to be a good time for them. It'll be interesting to see how they navigate. But I saw you smirk while Henry was talking, Henners, and I'm assuming it's at this comment, so I'll bring it up. Talking about Thiago. Now, that's an interesting conversation to be had because he is clearly in the elite class of midfielders in the world, but he's just not showing it at Liverpool, is he, Henners? Now, why do you think that is?
First of all, I've met Lee Catamol, lovely bloke, absolute shithouse player, but a lovely bloke. It seems like this signing was purely done on what he did at Bayern, but Bayern play a completely different system. They're not. Liverpool like to play workers in midfield. That's the best way I can put it. And when Thiago absolutely clattered into, I can't remember who it was, Gundogan or something at the start of the game against City, my first reaction was he's finished. He's not going to do anything this game because a lot of his game, I know people will say he's classy and he is. That's fine. But he's a little bit of a pest at times as well. And he likes to kick people. He's a Fernandinho, but not quite as bad as Fernandinho. He likes to go around kicking people, but he's good on the ball. I just didn't think it was when they signed him. I was like, okay, reasonable signing, but again, where the hell are they going to fit him in the team? So when they've got Fabinho and Henderson, and they might not be able to get Wijnaldum sign a new contract, but they'll still have Keita and they'll still have Jones. But where are they going to fit Thiago in with those players? Yeah. Oh God. The first bit's correct there. Trent's not a very good defender. But again, it was a weird signing for me, and he was supposed to be this protector against City in midfield, and he just didn't do anything. It's fine. He can get 95% pass accuracy in a game. I've said this before. Henderson was very good at doing that. 95% pass accuracy because he'd play about 3 forward balls. The rest would be sideways. I called him the crab before, but Thiago's the new crab. He just goes sideways and chipped a few through balls in. He did nothing against City. And this guy's supposed to be one of the best in the world. So he's either really not that good or he's playing in the wrong position. And I think it's the latter, personally. I can't see him being a bad player. But I just wanted to mention something very quickly on the Henderson issue, centre-halves. He got absolutely shown up by Phil Foden in that game. Absolutely shown up. I know when Alisson gave the ball away, he kind of tried to tuck back in and then got caught almost square on as a centre half. Bad idea. And then Fabinho got absolutely bugged by Foden, just knocked it around him and ran. And again, they're just showing that those two have worked against West Ham and against Spurs. But if you really test them with a reasonable player, they struggle. Henderson getting bodied by someone who's half his size was actually quite hilarious for me. But again, it just goes to show you, City tried this, didn't they, with Fernandinho, playing Fernandinho centre half, and he was just he was just shit. And everyone's looking at him when he gets taken on. Everyone's going, this guy, it's like the new Demichelis at the back, thinking, what the fuck are you doing? You get caught square on and they'd be turned inside out, and you're thinking, what on earth is he doing? So, he's tried the new thing. And in terms of Kabak, I think it was probably the right idea not to throw him into that game. But I think he's a good player. I've watched him for Schalke this year. It's a bit unjust because he's been playing with 10 pretty dog shit players around him. It's like, how could I best describe it? It's like Grealish in last year's Villa team. He got criticised a little bit because I know he kept them up, but he wasn't working and this and that. You're thinking, is he supposed to cover the distance the other 10 are supposed to cover as well? Or the other 9 outfield players? So, again, yeah, it was a good signing, I think, but again, they struggled without Van Dijk and Gomez, but Henderson at centre half, we should have gone for them at Anfield. We should have attacked them. We should have got Rashford 1-on-1 with Fabinho, and Megamind at the back trying to tackle Rashford would have been one of the funniest things I think you'd ever see. But again, we should have done it. We should have gone for him as City did, and I think we could have won that game pretty comfortably. But just seen that last comment. That's fantastic. I didn't know that actually.
Yeah, I saw that actually. I saw someone mention that spitting ban. Yeah.
Well, spitting racism, condoning racism as well. Wearing T-shirts condoning racism. That fits perfectly into their club mold, doesn't it? But yeah, I've said my piece on them now.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, the final point then, Henry, I'll come to you. Liverpool are getting a few players back. Van Dijk's slowly getting there. Jota's back in training, even though he's very light training, but he's on the road to recovery. Do you think United will finish above Liverpool this season, or do you think this is just a bit of a prolonged blip in Liverpool's season and they will pick it back up?
I don't. I said it's the last question. I don't know, but I don't know with this either. I don't know. It's hard to predict. We've seen us go on scintillating form, then lose to Sheffield at home. Football's a funny game. Anything can happen. Liverpool could go on a magnificent run now and properly end up pushing City. City could fall off, and especially this season as well. I know that's an old cliche now for this season, and everyone keeps saying it, but it is very open. Things are happening, differently in these conditions. These new sort of unprecedented. Another one for your cliche bingo there. Unprecedented times, but things are, they're volatile and clubs can fall off and have good form. So I don't know really. I'd hope that we'd have enough now to finish above them, definitely. I'm not sure exactly what the point gap is now. I don't know what it is exactly. Is it 6? I'm not too sure.
I think it's 5.
5.
Yeah, something like that. That's a decent little cushion, but that could be cut off, with a Sunday and a midweek game straight away. But yeah, we'll have to see. I'd hope that we'd have. I'd finish above them would be great. It would be absolutely brilliant. I think as I said, bridging the gaps, the goal, finished above Liverpool would be beyond what I'd ever predicted before the season started. So yeah, I'd like to think we'd have enough, but if they sort themselves out, we know Liverpool are a sort of big force to contend with.
Henry, can I ask one last question about something different?
Yeah, go on.
I'll put it in the best way possible. I saw you kind of got a little bit bodied by Pogba Senior for your De Gea comment.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on him this weekend? We've got West Brom. Keep him in the side or drop him?
See, it's tough, and I completely understand why people are calling for Henderson to start. Please don't get me wrong. I completely understand that. Why keep Dean Henderson at the football club if he's not going to be there to push De Gea when he's going to make mistakes? I think that was before the season started. We said, Henderson will probably start cup games, but should De Gea make big mistakes in a game, you'd think Henderson would be right on top of him to take over. And that's why I understand where people are coming from when they say Henderson should start, because, this is why he's here. But at the same time, I still think David De Gea is a much better goalkeeper than Dean Henderson. I do think that. And I think there's little basis for us to go off to suggest otherwise, if I'm honest. I think Henderson's been fine when he's played this season. I thought, last night he was very good, actually. I think he didn't have much to do, obviously. Very cold feet in the end for him. But, he came and claimed the crosses when he had to. That's what we didn't see from De Gea against Everton. So I think that was a big positive that we saw. With regards to West Brom, it's such a tough one. Honestly, I wouldn't complain from the off if he put Henderson for this game. But I will continue to back David De Gea. I've said many a time, I don't think goalkeepers lose a shot-stopping ability overnight. I mean, they all have bad form, and you could argue that De Gea's form has prolonged now, been quite bad past couple of years. 2018 World Cup's always pointed to as a moment where people think, that's when he sort of lost it. I still think David De Gea has been very competent this season. I want to get that out there. I don't think he's had a terrible season. I thought, back end of 18-19 is where I think De Gea was probably at its worst. There are a few games there. I think, Chelsea at home was a big game where he conceded sort of, and people have been, spamming his mistakes all over Twitter. You can't avoid them at the minute, going back through the archives. But I still think De Gea's had a very good season. But I think, Everton, he was poor. Obviously, there's no debating that. I think, it's not good enough. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know what he would do. But I can see why. If he starts De Gea or Henderson, I think there's good reasons for both. But I will continue to back David De Gea. I think he is by far the best goalkeeper at this club at the minute.
James, I'll ask you a similar question on the same topic, but a similar question. If he's dropped Martial for poor performances, which he has over the last few games, Martial was looking a bit kind of, against Sheffield United especially, shaky and poor. And do you think that sets a dangerous precedent if he doesn't start Henderson this weekend, that he can get away with making mistakes, De Gea, or do you think De Gea should still be in the side for the game on Sunday?
It's very dependent on how they go about dealing with this situation, because they'll know that De Gea's performances haven't quite been up to scratch. Obviously, there's a lot of good performances that just go unnoticed because that's what we expect of him, but there's more and more poor performances creeping in, and I think he's earned himself that respect within the club where he deserves to be treated better than Martial does when he's out of form. This is a guy who has kept us relevant up to this point. Without De Gea, we'd be struggling for Europa places each year, and we could have completely fell off the map entirely. But he's kept us there or thereabouts, so he deserves a lot of respect for that, and I think that's what he's getting. So if he doesn't start Henderson, I don't think it sets a dangerous precedent, as long as he has been warned behind the scenes that this can't continue. You need to improve, otherwise we will take the leap of faith as such. But I think we still stick with De Gea. I'd have liked, if I'm honest, I'd have liked to have seen Henderson loaned out again this year, because I just don't think De Gea's done enough to be moved from his number one spot. You see how he does for the rest of this season. If he carries on poor, we're not going to win the league this season anyway. So if it's in that sense, it's a bit more of a write-off season than some would have thought a couple of weeks ago. But see how he does for the rest of the season. If he continues being poor, then you've really got to look at what you're doing. Maybe give Henderson that shirt, because his performances in a United shirt have probably deserved the number one as well.
But if you don't, so I'll put it hypothetically here. If you start De Gea at the weekend and he makes another mistake, what's Henderson's reaction going to be to that? He's going to be thinking, surely I've come here to compete for the number one spot, and I've been told that if one keeper's not on form, I play. Simple as that. So, that's why we brought him back. Competition, good, because Romero was a little bit too settled in that second place position. So De Gea was happy as well. So if you start him and he makes a mistake, Henderson's surely just going to go, fuck this. I'm out. I don't want to be here. Why do I want to play, a peripheral role when De Gea is making mistakes anyway? So that's the reason I mentioned dangerous precedent, because if he makes a mistake at the weekend, we're in a bit of a sticky situation with goalkeepers then, because we've got two that want the same shirt and one that will get away with making mistakes. So I don't know.
Yeah, it's just difficult though, isn't it? Because De Gea is obviously, besides Phil Jones and that, De Gea has been here the longest within the first team, certainly. So he's got that aura of seniority. There we go. So I think the way you do have to be careful about the way you treat him, because he will be a popular figure in that dressing room, and you can't really go upsetting him too much, because what precedent does that then set for the rest of the club if you're singling out a senior member of the team? But I completely understand what you're saying. I mean, it'll all depend on how Dean Henderson chooses to react to this. If he thinks it's going to be a hard job displacing De Gea, and this is showing it, but it's going to be even more rewarding when I eventually do, that'll be a good way of looking at it. If he's 100% committed to United, which I have no doubt he is, then he will see this as a challenge a bigger challenge than he thought it would be, but it's going to be twice as rewarding when he does eventually complete it. But he would be well within his rights to ask for a move if De Gea keeps getting picked despite his mistakes, and that also shows that he's ambitious and wants to play. I'd be worried if De Gea carried on playing these performances and putting in these performances and wasn't getting dropped, and Henderson was happy to sit on the bench. That'd be the only wrong reaction to this, I think, in his point of view. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
I wonder whether Ole Gunnar Solskjaer will handle it the same way Ferguson handled this with players. So poor performances, players falling off. Players, I know De Gea got broke out a little bit against the club against Newcastle last year or something, wasn't it? And then he got the vice captaincy taken off him. I remember when Stam, well, I don't remember, obviously, because I was too young, but my dad's obviously spoken to me about it. Stam and Keane both speaking out, not necessarily just against the club, and Stam was one of the best players, as was Keane, and they both just got sold. Simple as that. Get rid of them. And I think, City have done the same with Aguero now. Some poor performances, some lazy performances, didn't really fit the style of play at times for Guardiola. They put Jesus in the team. Not necessarily better.
Aguero has been out with COVID.
Yeah, but beforehand, last year, whenever he was fit, you'd see him on the bench 90% of the time. He'd be on the bench and be rotated with a kind of auxiliary centre forward that's not usually a striker or Jesus. So I think if he has a childish tantrum, if you leave the hair out of your childish tantrum, I think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer will handle it the way Ferguson did, because he was watching him for so many years, and he'll just get rid of him. And maybe it's time for a new era. Maybe it is, because this has been happening for 2 or 3 years now, and I don't want to be nasty about it, but he's dropped us a few points, and those 2 points dropped against Everton were massive. I know there were other mistakes in the game, but they were massive. To draw that game right at the end, that damages you mentally as a side. So if you heard noises in the background, that was me, by the way. It was some bloody farm next door. So
that's my chair creaking. That's why I put myself on mute here. This chair is bloody terrible.
Okay. Nice. But anyway, see how he handles the situation. And I've just seen a comment about Oblak. It's not realistic, really, is it? They're not going to get rid of Oblak. De Gea is not quite at the same level as him. Even if you trade him with money, I don't think the owners would want to do that. So it's out of. I mean, Romero's back in the squad. With anyone seen that, back in the Premier League squad for the rest of the year. So maybe if 2 aren't performing, stick him in the side. You've got 3 competent keepers that are international level. Why not give him a shot if they're both not performing? So again, he's got a decision to make, and this decision will be telling at the weekend as to whether he trusts Henderson in the Premier League or whether he doesn't. Because I thought last night maybe dropped 1 shot, but didn't really put a foot wrong in the game. So I don't think you can knock him and not start him. But we'll see what Ole Gunnar Solskjaer does.
Fair enough. Well, just to end us off nicely then, we've got a comment, top 5 predictions. I'm assuming who will come top 5 in the league. So I'll come to you first, Henry, not Henners. You've talked enough. Shut up. So I'll come to you first, Henry. What do you think?
I think City are bankers for the title. I'd say City, there's not much really to speak about there. They've been excellent returning to the old sort of the City of old from the past couple of seasons that are lethal going forward. They keep the ball well. They're now a scary side to play against again, as they were a couple of seasons ago. So I'd say City top. Second's a tough one. I'll go our second. I'll go with us just about. I'd hope that we've got enough just to pip Liverpool. So Liverpool third. I'm actually going to go Chelsea fourth. I think they've probably got enough now. I think, I've only watched a bit of them under Tuchel, but it has been impressive. Fullbacks really high up, pressing well against Spurs. Spurs didn't press them much, but, they kept the ball well, Chelsea. So I'd say them fourth. Fifth's a tough one. I mean, there's a few sides you could say. I mean, West Ham are amongst it at the minute. I don't think they've probably got enough to stay there. Everton have got quality, and a great manager. Leicester, I think Leicester are probably favourites for that sort of to stick up there, but I'm gonna go Spurs. a team which I predicted to win the title at one point. Look a bit silly now for that, don't I? But yeah, I'd go with them 5th, just because I think they have got Kane's back. They're going to score goals. They've got quality. Don't get me wrong, Leicester have as well. They've obviously got Vardy, but I'd say Spurs just about. But anything could happen. It's a mess up there, to be honest.
Fair enough. Henners, what about you?
City will finish top, I think. I don't think there's any question about that now. They just look too good. Controversial pick for second. I think Chelsea will get it. Chelsea will get second in the league this year. And that's purely because their performances recently, I know they've been a bit meh, but when you're under a new manager and you're not really conceding goals, I think it's 1 in, 3 or 4 games now? If you're not shipping goals as a side, you're going to do all right. So I think Chelsea second. There's obviously only a 6-point gap now, and that's absolutely nothing in this season. I think we'll get third. I think Liverpool 4th because they're getting players back. And then, God, that's tough. Leicester 5th. If Kane gets injured again, which it looks like he might because he's so frail with those glass ankles, if he gets injured again, Spurs have had it. And even with him, they don't look a fantastic side still. I know he's 90% of what they do, but they don't look fantastic. And other than Kane and Son, if either one of those gets injured, they've had it. So, I think Leicester 5th.
Fair enough. Well, I'll go City top, obviously. I think Liverpool will pick it back up. I think they'll get second. United 3rd. Chelsea 4th, only because Leicester have a tendency to fall away at the end of the season. But I think they'll have done enough for 5th. I mean, that's not to discredit Chelsea. They look like a solid team again now. But, yeah, like you said, a good defence does more for you in this league than a good attack. And Chelsea seem to have refound that defensive ability. So, they should be good to go for the rest of the season. But yeah, that's my picks. Let us know what you think in the comments. If you're watching it back and you got this far, then fair play. But yeah, Henry, massive thanks for joining us again. It's always brilliant to have you on.
Thanks for having me, fellas.
Yeah, no worries. Henners, as ever, thanks for joining me, making occasional good point, I suppose. And thank you to everyone watching. If you enjoyed the video, be sure to like and subscribe. But without any further ado, we'll see you next time.
Manchester United are the champions of Europe again.